Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2025 Carbon Reform of Boston Northeast Reuse Group meeting. I have slides, which I should probably share. You get so into this and you forget that technology is what technology is. There you go. We made slides for this. So everyone, this meeting is going to be a little lighter. There's no major presentation topic, but Olivia and I wanted to go over some recent updates, and then towards the end hold a bit of a Q&A session, much like we were doing before this, just to talk about the industry and things going through. So before we get into this, Olivia, anything?
No, we just get into it.
There you go. So looking through a quick agenda, we wanted to do almost an informal working session around the all-for-use ecosystem map. It's a very powerful tool that I think needs to keep working through and making sure that is updated as a resource that the industry can use, and then talk about some events that's going on. Kristen Fritsch, our reached out to her yesterday, talk a little bit about LEAD V5 that recently just came out. She was on a materials tag to talk about some circularity focused credits and items that are really kind of turning up the dial on reuse, circularity, and waste diversion. And then Olivia will speak a little to the Circular San Antonio's tour, where they went to Copenhagen. We'll review the NESEA Reuse Workshop that was held in March, I think. And then talk with you all on any open Q&As you have, discussion points you have, and if not, we can look to end a little early. So let me share the link for this.
While you're doing that, just want everyone to be aware that this reuse ecosystem map exists, and it's kind of a crowdsourced database of reuse businesses and organizations around the country. I was looking at Massachusetts specifically, but we could also think about New England broadly. And there's 23 businesses in Massachusetts currently listed. I think there's many more that we could add. You could add your own organization under some category even. But if you would like to fidget and do something in the background while you're listening to our updates, underneath this map, there's a new form where you can put in an entry, and it asks for things like the business name and the address and what kind of services they provide. So it would be cool if our group collectively could just help contribute to what we know in our local area and build out the network here. And then hopefully it snowballs. People see that, oh, look at all these organizations here. They'll add some, or it'll spur people who are looking for businesses to find furniture or donate furniture, and just grow that and see all the great organizations that we already have. So on the slides, I have a list of businesses I'm aware of or that kind of popped up quickly in a Google that aren't there. And so you could, in the chat, pick one that you want to help add to the list and fill out that new entity form for it. I did notice, this isn't in the ad list, but there's not a lot of deconstruction contractors in the reuse ecosystem map right now, and that would probably be really valuable to add if people know those as well.
Yeah, I would say the more that this, and I'm pretty sure you're all seeing the screen, but the more that these kind of different groups can be added to this, the easier it becomes. It is kind of like a Tinder. The more that's available, the easier it is to kind of find it all and hopefully kind of match with something. To Olivia's point.
How do you know that?
To Olivia's point, it is difficult at times looking for strictly deconstruction contractors, especially when it comes to non-residential. We've talked about this for the past couple of years, but it's very hard to transition that if they are very small scale residential to commercial, and then oftentimes the big commercial demolition firms, unless they have a willingness or incentive to add that more mindful deconstruction scope. There are outfits that exist right now. It's a Costello Dismantling is a version of a deconstruction contractor, but at the same time, not too many exist. So in adding all these resources, not only is it good to see what does exist, but I think the absence of what you can see is also really important to kind of say, hey, we do need these services as well.
So I put in the chat the list that I had. Of course, you can add whatever. Doesn't have to be from that list. And then also a link to the form to add an entry.
Yeah. And if anyone has any that aren't, let us know, because as I said before, the very hungry for these resources. I think more and more. I mean, Mike Ellie was talking about beforehand. There's a growing need in Massachusetts and beyond for what does kind of not only better waste practice look like, but ways to divert this waste. And without resources like these, or at least knowledge of resources like these, we're going to keep sputtering along. Anything else on this before we move on? Nice. So, like I said, you should all have the resource if you want it either in the background or have something. Maybe use it as a bookmark as something comes up. Please, let's use resources like this to kind of keep growing what is possible and what's known. Moving on, I think it was Tuesday, the city of Boston had a Circularity Day. So it was right at City Hall. I went, it was pretty cool. I will say these are not my photos. I was talking so much I forgot to take photos. So these are ones that I took from various different other people on LinkedIn who had gone. But I will say it was a nice little day. The weather was good, and there were various, the city of Boston was there with their zero waste departments. There were a fair amount of composting outfits, a couple different machine AI driven helping waste diversion. But recently with the city of Boston hiring Alan Dubler, I think his last name is, as the new director of Circularity, he has really wanted to turn the heat up on some of these initiatives and really restart Susan Casino's old deconstruction initiative, which hopefully when that gets legs, will let you all know of potential projects that you can submit to be part of that in the pre-construction and the design development phases, because a lot more data collection is necessary. A lot more kind of fact finding is still necessary before a deconstruction ordinance can be released. We've all seen how long it takes for the zero net carbon zoning to actually take effect. And that was proposed, I think, in 2023. So the more awareness and the more kind of days like this that are happening, hopefully attracting more and more businesses, more and more industry to work towards this all. Moving on, and I see that Kristen is here. Levy 5 was open for new project registration 3 weeks ago, which is insane to think about. But through all the different material, carbon and waste credits, there is some pretty good material in there for reuse and circularity. So Kristen, if you have a moment, I'd like to hear your thoughts being on the tag.
Sure. Yeah. We're continuously refining these credits. So we meet every couple of weeks and have subgroups that also meet. So right now we're working on we did 2 sessions where we worked on the circularity pilot credit and what comes next for that. And then we're talking about wood most recently. But for the reuse credits, there's basically the MO has been since we started planning a couple years ago was it's okay to get double dip for points for reuse, whereas before with other versions of LEED it's been sort of like trying not to double dip, let people double dip for points, right? And so now we're all on the board with how can we encourage reuse. So the planning for zero waste operations, that's pretty straightforward. And then quantifying, assessing for embodied carbon, if you reuse materials, you're gonna have less embodied carbon. But what's interesting is the building product selection and procurement. So that's they've basically taken all of the BPDO credits and now they're building product selection and procurement. Doesn't roll off the tongue as easily, BPSP. But yeah, so if you go to that credit, you can see that they're using the buckets from the materials pledge or the common materials framework, and they're and this has been a continuous process. We're still going through. We have this huge chart of certifications, and so if you scroll down a little further, you'll see the levels. So we're assigning certifications to these levels. So level 1, 2, or 3 in terms of, like level 1 is like the minimum, level 2 is like a little harder to achieve, and level 3 we're trying to look at things that are really out there, really far reaching, and like you really maxing out the potential for the product. And so this only relates to these categories for right now. The following product categories, that list, similar to all of the low VOC credits, and because what we're trying to do is track all those things in one calculator, because obviously low VOC now is also part of that common materials framework for occupant health. So so it's a little complicated, but I don't know if I can share my screen, or I can send you the link in the chat, but there's a resource PDF that they have that goes along with this, and on page, let's see, there's the chart, page 4 of that has the chart as we've published it. There's a much larger and much more colorful and much more in-depth chart that we haven't published yet because we're still moving things around. But these were pretty obvious ones. These are most of the certifications that we most commonly use. But when it says other USGBC approved programs, we do have a much bigger, broader list. But if you go down to material reuse, we're maxing out at 5. So you can see the points that they're putting in, right? So climate health, it's a level 2, ecosystem health, it's a level 1, and circular economy, it's a level 2, which adds up to 5. And so that means that whatever the calculator ends up being, cost or quantity of material, you get to multiply it by 5. And then it also shows up, in the embodied carbon credit and the other credits and then there's a reuse credit, which we can go to that. Yeah, so there's that one, and then there's I think you had it next on your list in your slides. There's a material reuse one too.
Is there? Very exciting.
Yeah, let me go back. I'm trying to navigate the same thing. Building and materials reuse. So you're in CI, that's why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
at
So if you go
BDMC?
to newbie, yep. There's also building material or building and materials. So they've taken that out of the whole building LCA, right? And kind of incorporated it here. So it's mainly looking at structure and envelope, but you're getting, a lot of points for pulling in reuse. We hope. We're trying to support that in any way that we can.
Wow, very developed. And really a focus on that kind of 2 times multiplier. I would say, especially from a contractor point of view, very enticing to have kind of at 200 times or 200% the rate of making sure something is salvaged and going off site. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great advocates on the tag. both from actually surprisingly from like from actually suppliers too, or for manufacturers. So it's nice to see we have a couple waste companies represented, contractors, a couple designers, and then we did have and sort of still do have a couple people from we have someone from CLF National and then the EPA who was working on embodied carbon. But I don't know why my camera just shut off. Sorry.
Yeah, so
It won't let me
a
turn
lot
it
of
on.
different credits.
Sorry. Yeah, so a lot of different points. So if you have any questions, let me know, or if you have ideas. I mean, we are sort of uh uh got the pilot credits. We don't have a lot of room for pilot credits, um but I think it's focusing on, I think I can tell you that it's focusing on deconstruction, planning and um and a little bit more in depth on that. So if you have ideas,
Yeah.
send them our way. And also they have a call out for anyone who wants to apply to be on a lead tag group. So there's a lot of tags, and I'll dig up that link and put that in the chat too.
Nice. Thank you. On a very similar note, just because I have been looking at this a lot, the waste credit as well, really pushing towards better waste practices and reuse and circularity, definitely something that is being looked at and now considered. With language on it, I can go to the credit in a second. Source separated materials that are sent to recyclers directly. There's requirements of material streams that need to be going out as source separated for a certain number of points. Language on take back programs, salvage materials that are being using for offsite reuse at 200% diversion. And then something that I think is critically important, and we've probably talked about this ad nauseum in different meetings, or if you've ever talked to me about this in person, having an average facility rate capped at 35% diversion unless it is third-party verified. And currently, the only third-party verification, I think, in the US, or at least this side of the US, is the RCI, or the Recycling Certification Institute. So no more pieces of paper that say 85%, you did such a good job. Now, like I said, capped at 35%. Once again, alternative daily cover and anything incinerated being at 0%, and then any on-site reuse being excluded from those calculations as both a detractor from the denominator, so the total amount of waste altogether. So it ends up looking something like this. I took this screen grab. So if you want to get the maximum of 4 points, which typically you want to get as many points as possible, you'll have to go out of your way to source separate several different material streams to hit that, or use an RCI certified processor if you are commingling. And then, like I said on here, salvaging and source separating to go directly to either a reuse center or a direct recycler. No more taking materials to a processor and having them break everything down and trust us. Now it is a site separate and make sure that you're offsite reusing. If you want to get kind of the 1 ton of offsite reuse is going to be 2 tons towards diversion kind of thing. And I can share the link here as well. I mostly do interiors, so that's just what initially it went through. But LEED a couple years ago, several years ago now, dozen years ago, when it came out, really tried to move the market. The hope is that with V5, we can continue that market movement. Like I said before, Mike Elliott was speaking before we started the recording on the fact that not much is moving in a positive direction, or at least towards the 2030 goals. I think the hope with this is that there is some best practices that are pushed through of site separation, of using offsite reuse to really start spurring industry and economic growth in those regions as well.
Yeah, this was really tricky, and it was a lot of hours of conversation. I didn't think we were going to ever get to a point where we all agreed on how to make those pathways. But because there is a lot of, I mean, we're in a unique place here where it's common to recycle on site, but there are many, many, many lead projects where in places where they do not, they they can't recycle, or they don't have people who do that. So they were really concerned about you know, bringing up the bottom, basically. But I think they did USGBC did a really good job of hearing our concerns and formulating this. Speaking of waste.
It's trash day. Yeah, so hopefully, like I said, projects can register right now for the projects. It is very early days, but know that this is something that I've already seen clients at least curious about. So I imagine not only available right now, but I think V4 is being daylighted in 2026, end of Q1 2026. So this, if you're on lead projects in the next year and a half, pretty soon you'll have to do V5. So I would say if anyone is doing a project or at least wants to know what cutting edge or market movement looks like, take a look at these links, which will also be sent out with the meeting notes as well. From there, we can move on. Olivia?
Yeah, just a quick update on, so Circular San Antonio is an organization in San Antonio promoting circularity, I think more broadly, not necessarily buildings, but they have been hosting these delegations to Europe to see how other cities are doing sustainability and circularity. So I came back just a week ago from the Copenhagen delegation, and it was a very good broad coverage of talking to cities and municipalities, talking to developers, designers, product manufacturers. We went to a waste to energy plant, which is that center bottom photo of a pile of trash waiting to be burned. And there were 3 people from Boston who attended, names listed there: Rebecca from Thornton Tomasetti, Eric Sargent from Circular Club of Boston, who was probably at the City of Boston event that Michael talked about. And I think we're going to get together and try and do a presentation somewhere, somehow, of what all we learned from our week-long excursion. But the next few slides, I just picked out 2 projects that I thought were very cool and exciting. So this is Churning House. Churning is a contractor and I think mostly demolition and civil contractor, but they renovated their own headquarters and committed to using as much reused materials as possible. And
the opportunity they have, of course, is being a contractor and their own client, and they use the materials that they demolish from other sites. So some before and after. It was actually a really lovely space to be in terms of daylight and the diversity of materials. So the next slide has some stats. 89% reuse, which is pretty impressive. They talked about how they had to work with their architects differently. The architects would make their drawings and make everything metal stud and gypsum walls, and then they'd be like, no, that's not the materials we're using. Don't put the materials in like that. Like, we've got brick, we're gonna make that wall brick, or we've got this. And I was also interested in how they gave it kind of a social aspect. They didn't want their renovation to feel too new and perfect and clean, so that their contracting employees would feel comfortable coming into the office and tracking in with their boots, or not concerned about scuffing up the walls, kind of thing. And maybe it's an after the fact explanation, but being able to tie it not just material reuse, but also into like how people feel with the materials that are used in a space. And the last photo is a few just up close images. They did use structural members, so precast concrete. They reused a foundation wall, and I asked how they managed to get it in there, and contractors just like, we just used a crane, like no big deal. Using offcuts of wood from carpentry on site as flooring or wall finishes. They reused IGUs and just had a carpenter frame, like essentially build framing for it in place. Yeah, so very cool. And another project is a Varvstaden neighborhood in Malmö, Sweden. It is an industrial shipyard area that they're redeveloping with housing and mixed use and more of a lively neighborhood. So they had the opportunity of having many buildings, a lot of industrial buildings, one of which they used as a material bank for the whole site. And so they deconstructed a number of what was already there and stored it here, created an online platform of what was available, and all the new projects and development going on could and were encouraged to source from this material bank. So it's not the same as they were trying to have all the buildings be 90% reused materials, but more that they wanted to keep as much as possible of what they took down from the site still on this site. So the new buildings are a mix of stuff from the bank, but also new materials. Yeah, I could talk a lot about all the various things, but I thought these two projects were relevant. One for actually building with reuse and setting up an infrastructure for a project. Like I could see this neighborhood one working out for a campus or large property owner.
Yeah,
Alright.
I would add on that note, so at Living Future last week, I didn't take any photos because I was furiously taking notes. Gensler put on a presentation from San Francisco, and in that working with an owner, Genentech, a big life science pharma company, and in this, very similar to what you're seeing here, have a lot of space and are saying on this campus, why can't we use the space we have to, with the construction projects we have, to use what we currently have as the materials for new projects? So much to this point, hopefully we can get it from Gensler, but using old structural members as new kind of partition walls or new pieces and parts and projects. So there is apparently a Gensler circularity playbook that's looking to come out using Genentech as an example. So when that does come out, we'll hopefully look to share it with you all. But this concept, I think, is very, very powerful, where oftentimes the market right now, at least in the US, doesn't have the ability to have that storage space or the technology connected all. Can large owners who do have all this start connecting the dots and show by example these first steps and that it is possible? So really cool example. And the last major item, just wanted to go over with you all. So we didn't, it was in April or March?
I might, maybe it was in March. I don't know.
When was NESEA? Who knows? But several weeks ago, Olivia and I presented at NESEA, talking a bit less technical and a bit more theoretical to a lot of designers and building owners about a lot of the lessons we've learned in meetings like this and what kind of cutting edge looks like right now. So if you were there, thank you. I think it was a really robust and good conversation in having, and we can go to the next slide in a moment, but really presenting different strategies and themes of, hey, have you considered this reuse strategy for your project? Have you considered this major theme? And having the groups that were there, like I said, designers, owners, different reuse vendors, and contractors go over, hey, this is what we see as a roadblock, and this is what how we can move through that, whether it's through collaboration, cooperation, and then lastly, asking people to send their commitments and what they're going to commit to push forward circularity and reuse. So I thought it was really, really quite good.
Yeah, getting into the content we got out of it. So we had up to 6 strategies, which we span from goal setting or reusing materials or doing embodied carbon analyses, kind of the gamut of what you might do in a project and what your role might be and what you might be interested in. We asked people in the first half to just put down the questions that come up when you, in trying to think about how to implement this, the nitty gritty, the logistics, etc. And then we had groups mix up and answer the questions of the first group, because it's always easier to answer questions that are not your own. And across them, I think the specific themes that came out of it, one, everybody's talking about storage, and just where does it go, who's responsible for it, the durations of storage. So that's giving me the idea that there's a resource that could be developed for all the various situations and solutions for storage. I personally think it's not that we don't know how to figure out storage, it's just we don't have these different ways of storage built into our process currently. But there's ranging from on-site material reuse, storing it on-site and reusing it, figuring out that timeline, or recovering it from on-site, storing it nearby in a container on-site, or storage unit elsewhere, maybe on a campus, or farther out, bringing back. Then there's the storage of materials from other projects that go into, that you want to take into yours, storage for just overall infrastructure of material that's not yet claimed for a project. Where does that go? So I think when we say storage, we can actually break it down into many different specific scenarios and tackle each one of those. Hazmat comes up often and is totally a legitimate concern. It's another one that I think we already have ways of working around. Like, we know what needs to be abated. We have entire industries and practices around abating and assessing hazardous materials. It's just, frankly, we're not going to use them, certainly. I don't think the reuse movement is trying to say we have to reuse everything that already exists. And we can learn from the materials that we put in that we're having trouble reusing to make better decisions about what we put in for our future selves. And then, of course, network building. It was very fun to go among the tables and hear people posit questions of like, oh, well, if only someone did this kind of service, or is it possible to do X, Y, Z? And someone else at the table from a different silo, call it, would be like, oh yes, of course, like we've done that, or I know a business who does this, or so matching the different buckets of expertise that's in the industry, matching goals and timelines of this project coming online or offline, matching material inventories. I think all of this is just about building out the network and letting those connections happen.
Yeah, and I would say continuing to break down silos, something we've, the past couple, whether it's workshops, meetings such as this, different conferences, still I would say is the case that oftentimes everything's very, very siloed. Whether it's, hey, I had this project success that I was able to do something that we weren't able to do before, we're around reuse, salvage, not communicating that, or not realizing there's a resource. I think at this workshop, there was a window reclaimer out of Southern Vermont who afterwards came up to us and said, hey, I want as many of these types of windows as possible. I didn't realize that there was a growing network or a growing appetite for these kind of things. I want to be a bigger part of this. So I think knowing that those resources exist, however small, and then growing them to kind of match the demand, and not getting as many Teams messages, is going to be important going forward. So really good to kind of, like I said, as Liv said, not only have people kind of digest this and look through this and give their different opinions, but also to kind of see that this isn't just a singular activity that one or two people are looking to do, that it's whole parts of the industry and whole projects and entire companies are looking to contribute. So hopefully we can continue to have these. And much like the events prior to last year's Green Build, which Kristen and I were on and some of you attended, there is a lot of information to digest and push through for these. So hopefully we can take a good look at all these commitments and double back and see if people have actually committed to them or kind of what the common themes of the commitments are to hopefully push the market forward. With that, that is the end. I'll stop sharing screen. That is the end of all of our slides. We can open it up to Q&A and discussion. I see Mike Elliott is still on. Mike, if possible, even if it's just a short recap, could you recap what you said earlier in this meeting now that it is being recorded? Just almost a recap of the C&D subcommittee from a week or two ago.
Sure, to do that, Michael. So first, I apologize that I have not yet posted the meeting materials from the May 8th C&D subcommittee meeting. And as is typical for the past few years, the May meeting focuses primarily on reporting out on analysis of the calendar year 2024, the previous year's annual report data. So I provided, summary tables. I also report on the MPS, that's the minimum performance, the C&D minimum performance standard compliance of each of the large C&D handling facilities, of which we have 28 operating across the state of Massachusetts, 18 of which are processors that actually, process the materials and are trying to achieve the process separation rate, and another 10 that are operating as transfer stations that transfer all the unprocessed material to one of the MPS compliant facilities. So I report back on the MPS compliance status. And then the third thing this time was to also solicit suggestions for our, where we have a Mass DEP has a solid waste master plan, of which the C&D action plan is one part of the decennial solid waste master plan. We have our 2030 solid waste master plan goals that Mike asked earlier. How when do we hit the panic button? Well, one of the ways that we establish how we're going to achieve our goals is through the C&D action plan, and we're at the midpoint. 2025 is the year we said we would reassess how we're doing. So I reported on kind of like what we had identified as actionable items that we were going to pursue during this 10-year period and how we're doing. And, and now's the time to say, well, how can we do course correct? How can we improve and get closer to the goal that we're trying to achieve? So it was interesting. I think, what I spoke about earlier before we started recording was just some of the results of the summaries of the in-report data. And as I started to say, the good news is that the industry-wide process separation rate improved to 19%, which is better than last year. And in fact, it's the highest level we've achieved since implementing the C&D minimum performance standard in 2020. Unfortunately, the amount of C&D waste disposed, that number, the total quantity, in tons of waste disposed, did not drop because, we can probably find all kinds of reasons, but the bottom line is that we're still separating about the same amount of material from the waste stream. There are different ways that the process separation rate is not a pure, calculation of amount recycled over the amount recovered. There are, credits for materials that diverted to another facility, or, credit for, we deduct, some tonnage for inbound materials that are accepted. So, it's not a straight calculation. So even though the process separation rate increased, the real number and the number that our solid waste master plan goal is based on is the amount of waste disposed. And unfortunately, that number is not dropping. In fact, it increased slightly. Another thing that I presented as part of that discussion was I did a very crude, simplistic sensitivity analysis of what would happen if we achieved our process separation rate goal, which right now we have a goal of all, industry-wide, every facility has to meet 25% by 2030. So what if we achieve that goal? Or what if we achieve better than that, 30%, 40%, 50%, even at 50%? If everything remains equal, if we continue, if we continue to receive the same amount of C&D waste, we're even at 50% process separation rate, we would not meet our 2030 solid waste C&D waste reduction goal, which is a reduction of 260,000 tons compared to the baseline year in 2018. So we're at 1.2 million tons disposed per year right now. We've been kind of stuck at that level for the last 2 or 3 years. And our goal against the 2018 baseline is to achieve a disposal of no greater than 725,000 tons. We're just not even close. So our takeaway and what we announced to the world at this meeting was that, look, C&D processors alone are not going to get us to our C&D waste reduction goal. We need to take an all of the above approach, and we need to put a lot more effort behind deconstruction. Thus, my colleague Kathy Mirza is heading up our deconstruction work group. We need to put more effort behind job site source separation, reuse, and reducing the waste, reducing as much as possible. Unless we reduce the top line, the amount of waste that's being generated, unless we reduce that, we're never going to get to our goal of our waste reduction goal.
That's pretty powerful stuff there, then. Even if processors really turn up the heat, they double or at times triple, given some of the numbers that you were able to send out, that's still not enough. That fundamental change is necessary in kind of the process itself.
Yeah, or some magic market outlet comes along that can take 50% of our waste stream out of and do something with it.
Interesting.
And that's another thing. We announced that this is the first year we are offering a waste reduction innovation grant, which is some really big bucks, up to $2 million to attract and install technologies that will allow us they're innovative technologies to process or the materials that were the waste materials that we're generating. So we're really putting some big money out there to try to attract and create a market environment in Massachusetts to help make some big changes to the marketplace.
The link was shared, I think it was shared last meeting as well, but I shared it again here for anyone. I think applications are open until mid-July, I believe.
Correct, yeah, mid-July. Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that update. And once again, very powerful, very interesting, and very necessary breakdown there. So the only other thing I have, and I'll quickly do before opening up to the group, is that, and I'll share again real quick, this August is for Build Reuse, is the Build Reuse Conference. So between August 4th and 6th in St. Paul, Minnesota. I believe for a while now, the registration has been open. It is still open for anyone who wants to attend. I wasn't able to make it last year, but I'm hoping to make it this year and present at it. But from what I've heard from people who have gone, a very, very good conference, getting into the nitty-gritty, a lot of passionate professionals who want to collaborate, share best practices. So if this is something you can swing, I don't know if Melissa Wenzel is on. I know she's a big part of this all, but a really good conference, I've heard. So we'll share the link as well.
Well, yes, I am here. Thank
you.
We're so excited. We're just starting to send out announcements to the speakers. We're extending the early bird registration rate, knowing that with the deadline being in 2 weeks and we're just making those announcements, people need time to plan either as a speaker or non-speaker. So really excited. We have a tour planned. It's free. It's included with the cost of admission. So it's going to be a great time. Welcome to Minnesota.
Very exciting. Thank you. Okay, so let me share that. And then with that, I think that's all the updates. If anyone either wants to raise their hand or ask a question, I think it's some open Q&A time for the last 10 minutes. Kristen.
Can I share my screen really quick?
Sure.
This is awesome. I'm so excited. And Olivia, that tour to Copenhagen is so cool.
They're accepting applications for one in Switzerland in the fall, and I think Copenhagen again next year.
Cool. So we went to Copenhagen last summer, and I was thinking as you were talking, like how ingrained it is. I don't know if did the screen share work?
I hit accept, so try again.
All right.
There you go. Technology.
And you're seeing the picture of, yep, I got it. Yeah, so Copenhagen is so cool because they're doing this stuff, but I think what's missing from our culture is that it's not ingrained in the culture at the minimum level, right? And we were biking all around, and they have these stations all over. I mean, this one looks pretty bad, pretty sad, but you can see like there's clothing, there's housewares, books over here. And these were just all over the neighborhoods. Let's see if I can go. Oh, whoops, sorry. There we go. There's, guess I can't make these bigger. But you can see these, they were just everywhere. Some looked a lot nicer than others. These dumpsters were built in. They had like a little shed. And they all had the same things, right? Books and clothing and housewares, all over the neighborhoods. I thought that was super cool. And you build it into their thinking, and then if you bring, you think, then you carry it through to your business.
Yeah, they talked about that too, like just trying to expand that more. So I think like major buildings or every neighborhood does aim to have I think they called it a recycling or reuse center, but basically, yeah, an area where people can drop things off and other people can pick it up.
Yeah, they seem to be like at parks, just like a little unused corner of a park. So it was really cool. But anyway.
Yeah, no,
Maybe
the necessary and different kind of way of thinking about it. Something that I think a lot of people in this group are trying to ingrain in the industry, but I think at a bigger level, how can we push forward, whether it's in the city, Boston, Greater Mass, in New England, to have things like this as well? Sure.
Curiously, I learned that at the waste to energy plant that I guess Denmark's waste is actually decreasing and their plant's capacity is now higher than their waste generation. So they import waste to produce their country's energy. And they also say our waste to energy plant's most efficient in the world, so why not burn other people's waste here rather than there? But yeah, it's an interesting kind of interconnectedness of all of the systems, our stuff, energy, global scale of it.
And you didn't show pictures of the beer garden on top of the waste plant.
Oh, I do have, yeah, a glorious photo of the steam stack and the greenery, and they have a lot of recreation too, just generally, which I also appreciate. Their built environment. They're like, they'll just have a swing set in the middle of the sidewalk, or the roofs of their parking garages and energy plants are ski hills and parks. And I think it maybe also builds a culture of appreciation for infrastructure, whereas maybe now we think of infrastructure as like stuff we don't want to look at, we don't think about it, people don't engage with it, and they kind of just have it in the open as part of daily life because that's what keeps cities going.
A different way of thinking for sure. With the last 5 minutes, anyone else, any comments, concerns, developments, questions, insights? Welcome to the group.
I saw Khalil asked about designing for deconstruction. Just wanted to open up if you wanted to expand on that, Khalil.
Oh, sorry, you're asking me to expand, Olivia?
If it's just giving you the opportunity if you wanted to.
No, I was just thinking, I think the problem starts how we design, right? How we build. And of course, we're not thinking like that to take it apart right now. So I think the idea is to start making architects, engineers, designers, to think how to put it together so it's easy to take it apart. So that's the thought.
Definitely.
Yeah, I, as a reply to your comment, put in the project manager's guide for commercial deconstruction as well. I think a couple, I was about to say episodes ago, a couple meetings ago, we had someone Fisher from MSR Design talk about this. Also, Hennepin County helped fund this, but I think it's at times a radically new way of thinking. I think a lot of design, a lot of the AEC industry is very, very set in. We've been doing this for this long. We want to keep doing this, and then ideas like designing for deconstruction come along and really throw everyone in a tizzy. We're a very risk averse industry. At the same time, I think we've been championing. There's a lot of good first, second, third steps to start taking to kind of chip away at all of this. If you want to take a look at that project manager's guide, there are pretty good spec sections, pretty good reuse and deconstruction plans. But at the end of the day, still a lot more can be done from everyone, whether you're a designer, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a contractor, sub, all the way down the line, policymaker. A lot more needs to be done to kind of push us in the right direction. Because parroting both Mike Elliott's point and a lot of different reports that keep coming out, still not doing enough to actively and properly combat the waste and climate crisis.
I have a question on that, Mike. Is I know, was it last month we had
MIT?
Juliana, I forgot her last name, the
Yes.
professor. And we were talking about the project that was in Colorado, and I think you were talking about, or she was talking about how the city had a very progressive legislation or initiative or something, and that it was basically a government situation where they had property they were demolishing, and then they were needing to build a new hospital, and so they were able to do that circularity. And I was wondering, do you know anything about that legislation in Colorado?
I don't off the top of my head. I will say that recently.
Sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, but so I'll say a local example, the Mass Climate Omnibus that recently passed had the Embodied Carbon Council in it. And from that Embodied Carbon Council, it's been developing, and there is a circularity aspect of it. So I think Caroline Murray of Turner is leading that up right now. But in looking at kind of doing it, but not really doing it, setting essentially carbon budgets for a lot of things. When it comes to setting these requirements, how can circularity work? We talked about with Levy 5 credits, and knowing that reuse is eliminating those A1 to A3 aspects of the embodied carbon. How can we use policy to drive that forward? And by setting the requirements, I think in Colorado, policy saying, hey, this is an opportunity to not only kind of put our money where our mouth is, but also showcase that we can do it. So I think the hope is that Mass comes to a point where it's developed enough to start doing things like that. But a good idea to look into that Colorado, and look at last meeting's recording to kind of see what exactly was done and how to push that more here.
I'll follow up with Caroline and make sure she gets
Sure.
that. 'Cause I do think it is that we've seen that over the history of sustainability in Massachusetts, is the leading by design, leading by example. And I think the big obstacle with the reuse and the circularity is, that infrastructure and
Sure.
the logistics. And so if they can get started, government can help on that too. So
Yeah, 100%.
that's good to know. Thank you.
Any last comments in the last minute? Once, twice? Great. So I want to thank everyone for coming. A good meeting. We didn't have too much planned, but it really turned out to be good. all of the notes we take and all the different links in the slideshow will be sent out. I will say for next month, we're having, if you were at the 2024 Embodied Carbon Summit that was put on by CLF last year, Jen Chen, who was, I think, on the other coast in Seattle, a designer, talked a little bit about a project I presented with her at Living Future on designing for reuse and circularity, and we'll be hosting her next month in June to talk about a project in which when a designer or an owner really want to design for reuse and incorporate circularity, how effective it can truly be, and driving down embodied carbon about 65% over the entirety of the LCA simply through reuse and circularity. So if you want to know more about that next meeting, that one's for you. So Olivia, anything else in closing?
That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank everyone once again. We'll send out the recaps probably early next week because today is Friday. And if not, everyone have a good weekend and enjoy the hot, sticky weather.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.